Hey everybody, it's Dr. Eric Walcavage. We're back for another edition of Thyroid Thursday. And today we're talking about reduced T4 to T3 conversion. We got a lot of comments. I know we put out on Instagram. If there's something you want to learn about, give us a comment, and we'll try and cover your questions in a Thyroid Thursday, in a podcast short, or even maybe in a long version of the podcast. And so keep the questions coming, or the things you want to learn about coming. But today we're going to talk about reduced T4 to T3 conversion. So I guess the first question is, does it matter whether you convert T4 to T3 well? I guess some people say it doesn't really matter because they're not concerned about measuring T4 or measuring T3 or free T3. They're just concerned about TSH and free T4. The reality is T4 needs to convert to T3 inside the cells and tissues, bind to receptors, and support your metabolism. Yes, T3 in circulation can also get inside the cell, bind to receptors, and support physiology, but the T4 that's converted to T3, that T3 stays in the cells and tissues longer than the T3 that's just coming from the bloodstream. And a lot of cells prefer to kind of have a balance of the T3 coming from the bloodstream and the T3 that they bring in, because then they can self-regulate their metabolism. So does it matter? It absolutely matters. Far and away, when somebody says, I don't feel good on my thyroid medication, and you start looking at T3, free T3, you're gonna find that these levels are lower than we would consider healthy or optimal. All right, so that's part one. Part two is, how would you even determine if you have reduced T4 to T3 conversion? Well, number one, if you're taking thyroid medication and you still have a lot of thyroid symptoms, there's a good chance that you're not doing a great job converting T4 to T3 in some of the cells and tissues, okay? But how do we determine it? You have to run a full thyroid panel at a base. And so a lot of people say they run a full thyroid panel, and then a lot of people have different explanations of what a full thyroid panel is. A medical physician may say a full thyroid panel is a TSH and a free T4. Maybe somebody in an integrative space would say a comprehensive thyroid panel is a TSH, a free T4 and a total T3, or a free T4 and a free T3. Somebody else might say a comprehensive thyroid panel adds reverse T3 or thyroid antibodies. The reality is that a comprehensive thyroid panel, TSH, total T4, total T3, T3 uptake, reverse T3, free T4, free T3, and if you want to run thyroid antibodies, thyroid antibodies. And that's a whole nother discussion about thyroid antibodies, but that is a comprehensive thyroid panel. Now, I don't even think that's good enough. I think if you want to look at what's happening with T4 to T3 conversion, we can't just run the thyroid panel. We have to run it in context with at least one tissue indicator of what's going on with thyroid physiology. And I typically run it with lipids because that's the thing that's most dysregulated when there's reduced T4 to T3 conversion. And so run lipids with it, run blood glucose markers, run inflammatory markers, run renal and adrenal markers, run liver tests. If you run your thyroid panel on its own, you could, all the values may be in a, what somebody might call a normal or even a lab reference range, a normal range, an optimal range, but yet there's still reduced T4 to T3 conversion. How would you know that? Beyond just signs and symptoms, you would look for signs, for indicators in the tissue patterns. And I've done another Thyroid Thursday on this. Go back and look at it. I think it's called like the 8 patterns of tissue hypothyroidism. So go back and look at that. I think I also talk about that in my book with Dr. Kelly Haldeman, The Thyroid Debacle. But this brings in a really important question, which is, if you're taking thyroid medication, should you take the thyroid medication before the test? And my answer is typically depends. It depends on who's asking you to get a blood drawn and what they're trying to determine. In general, I say don't take your thyroid medication before you're getting your thyroid panel done. If you're only on T4, it probably doesn't make that big of a deal, but it can make a deal on a shifting in the numbers. But the T4 number is more stable because of the half-life of T4. But if you're taking T3 medication and you take T3 medication before the blood draw, it is going to influence your T3, your free T3, and your TSH numbers. It's going to, no matter what. So it's my suggestion that you determine whether you want to take the meds and when to take them based on what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to find out. If you're trying to find out if you have reduced T4 to T3 conversion, don't take the T3 medication before the blood draw. Because what you want to see is how good a job you're converting the medication or the T4 you make into T3. So you might say, well, if I don't take my T4, then how am I going to be able to see the T4 to T3 conversion because I won't have appropriate T4? The half-life of T4 is about 7 days. So the T4 you took yesterday and the day before and the day before, there's a lot of that still in the system. What isn't going to be shown if you don't take the medication before is you're going to lose a lot of the influence or the manipulation of the T3 medication you take, because the T3 that you're taking is only, the half-life of that is like 12 to 24 hours. So if you took your T3 medication today and tomorrow morning you get your bloods drawn without taking the morning dose of T3, you're really showing what the thyroid gland is able to make and what the tissues are able to convert from the T4 you're taking into T3. And if your total T3 is low, if your free T3 is low, that's a good indication that you're not converting T4 to T3 very well. If the reverse T3 is elevated and that's been run, that's another really good indication that you're not converting T4 to T3 very well. Now, does that mean that you have broken physiology and you can't convert this? I get this a lot of times. I'm a non-converter. I've been told I can't convert T4 to T3. That's BS. Even if you have the genetic polymorphism, you're typically only downregulated about 20%. So if your T3 is like 70 or 80, that's probably not just a genetic issue. So what do you do in that situation? Can you take T3 to raise your T3 levels? Sure, it'll raise the blood T3 levels. It may or may not influence all the tissues evenly. And so it may not necessarily increase your metabolism, restore all your symptoms. You may get a short time bump when you first take it, but then the body, if there's a cell stress inflammatory mechanism going on, T4 is getting deactivated to reverse T3, that T3 is going to get deactivated and metabolized as well. So it'll last short term. So run, depending on, we talked about the meds. If you're trying to determine if you have T4 to T3, reduced T4 to T3 conversion, don't take your meds before your thyroid panel is being drawn. So how do you improve it? That's what everybody wants to know. How do I improve it, right? So you got to identify what's creating this reduced adaptive decreased conversion of T4 to T3. It's not broken physiology. It's secondary to some type of cell stress inflammatory process. So you got to identify the stressors. In the short run, could you do something that's anti-inflammatory supplementally that may potentially help improve conversion? Yeah, maybe, but that's only a short-term strategy in most cases. But could that temporarily provide some benefit? Yes. But if you don't identify the stressors, the body's pretty smart. It's going to increase more inflammatory processes and continue to reduce the T4 to T3 conversion. So you have to identify what these are. Are they diet? Is it lifestyle? Is it emotions? I can't tell you how many people have seen multiple practitioners that their mindset and the stress that's created by just their chronic health issues is sometimes the biggest driver in the room. And the second biggest driver is the over supplementation or overuse of supplements to try and manipulate things into range. And probably the third biggest stressor is the over medication, trying to manipulate labs into range. You got to reduce or eliminate the stressors. You got to increase your fitness factors that Dr. Kelly and I talk in the book: diet, lifestyle, mindset, habits. And then we need to support the recovery. And how that is for each individual is going to be different. But can taking T3 med change symptoms? Yes, but it's typically temporary at the dose, and then you got to increase and increase and increase to maintain it. Does taking T4, T3 medication increase T4 to T3 conversion? It doesn't. So people say, well, look, my conversion's better since I've been taking T3. No, you're measuring the T3 you're taking. And does taking T3 medication decrease T4 to T3? It absolutely can because of the suppressive effect on TSH. And does taking T3 address the cause of the hypothyroidism and CDR to begin with? It does not. So you can't manipulate your way into health by, hey, if your body's reducing the conversion of T4 to T3, taking T3 likely only provides temporary benefits at best, and sometimes actually creates more problems. All right. If you have any questions, put them below this video. Take care.